He has a gallery in Durand, Wisconsin, featuring works of many local artists, and I'd say at this point of renown throughout the Midwest and maybe the country. The works have a special appeal for environmental healing because many of them, at least from my uneducated perspective in the arts, feature natural objects in a wonderful light that I don't know how to explain it, but there's that ephemeral quality that brings this art to an environmental perspective and a healing perspective. So, without further ado, let's welcome Gina Accola.
I'd like to hand out a clipboard to everyone because we're going to hopefully have some time to do a couple of quick exercises. And first of all, who's left-handed here? Okay, there's one for you. You get a special one. And Dave, would you mind taking some of those clipboards and passing them out over on this side? I've got one. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. Public speaking is not in my wheelhouse, so please be generous and understanding. So when Dave invited me to do this, one of the reasons I agreed to it was as much for my own sake, to kind of put some of these things into some formal structure, and in a way that hopefully I tend to share some of these ideas already with people, but this gives it a little bit more forethought and balance. So starting out here, let me see if I have this thing going in the right direction. I do. Leonardo da Vinci said that drawing was much more than illustration. It was the key to understanding creation and creativity. I'd like to share with you today my experience and research into the process of making and viewing art and how it appears to share the characteristics of meditation. I think of it as applied meditation, and I'd like to include a third leg to the chair of art and meditation, and that is nature. Looking at the practice of eco-psychology and how it integrates meditation in various art forms, especially drawing. Artist Robert Morrissey, who's also trained as an art therapist, explains how this might work. The practice of perceptual representation enlists the principles of and is analogous to the practice of meditation. It cultivates an awareness of the intrusions and the distractions of the mind that impede perception. It requires a slow, steady, and sustained point of focus. It demands our time, patience, and trust. It rewards a practitioner with a richer and deeper understanding of the empathy for the world that we inhabit. But why drawing and painting? Well, one thing that I think about, when he used the word focus in that description there, and when I was a teenager, my father was studying transcendental meditation. And one of the things he was asked to do was to bring a flower. And I'm sure that was probably to focus, something to focus upon. Of course, I believe that oftentimes mandala is the thing that person focuses on in the process of meditation as well. So it's a way of quieting the mind. Similarly, in the process of drawing or painting, you strive to focus on what you see. Like the flower of the transcendental meditation practitioner, you must really see. You have to see the actual itness of the object in front of you. And there is a way to intentionally focus the part of the brain that is best able to take you to that focused meditative state. Most of the information that I'm sharing with you in this portion is from a book by Betty Edwards called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with it. It's been around for a long time, I think since the mid-70s. and still being used in art classrooms especially. But she didn't actually intend it to be entirely or strictly for art students. It's really something that everyone can do. It's actually quite amazing. It almost seems miraculous, and we're going to do some exercises to try this. So her book is based on brain research done at Caltech back in the 1960s. They were called split brain studies by Roger Sperry and his students, which found that each hemisphere of the brain, the right and the left, perceives its own reality. They found that the left brain in nearly all people is the dominant and verbal and analytical side. The right side is feeling, emotions, it's more global, perceptual, and spatial. The two modes tend to interfere with each other, and they prevent our maximum performance, especially when it comes to drawing or actually seeing things. And sometimes they cooperate, they contribute their own special skills. As a result of these studies, Betty Edwards says, shifting to the right mode releases you for a time from the verbal, symbolic dominance of the left mode. And that's a welcome relief. The pleasure may come from resting the left hemisphere, stopping its chatter, keeping it quiet for a change. This yearning to quiet the left mode may partially explain centuries-old practices such as meditation and self-induced altered states of consciousness. The left mode, that chatty dominant side, operates in a shorthand of symbols. It's very efficient, it works very fast, and it needs to process a lot of information so fast that it doesn't have time to actually see things. What it does instead, so that it can work really fastly, is it oversimplifies things. It creates symbols for things. And when you're trying to draw something and you're looking at something and you're kind of operating out of that left mode, your results are going to be oversimplified, sort of like a child who draws a face. If you're trying to do a portrait drawing, let's say, if you're working out of that left side, it's going to just be an icon of a face, let's say. The brain, in that case, it's not really processing reality, it's processing symbols. So the left mode sees, for example, when drawing the nose, like a triangle for a nose on a face, or whereas the other side, the right side, actually sees the shapes, the way the light reflects off the skin. So if you can engage the right mode in this process, the mode that seems to regard things as they are in the present moment, seeing things for what they simply are, shapes, lines, shades of color and light, then you will have a realistic representation. My experience, I'm sorry to admit, with traditional meditation is I have a really hard time getting that chatty left side to shut up. And then maybe I get it to shut up, but I fall asleep. Or I feel impatient, like I just want to do something else. And so I've never been all that successful with traditional meditation. And likewise, when I sit down to paint or draw, especially if I haven't been doing something like that in a while, let's say I've taken a break of a few weeks or a month, and I think I generally am pretty, like most people, pretty dominant left brain, and I'll start to draw, and I'll have this physical sensation of tiredness, like, oh my goodness, I have got to go lay down. My body is just begging to get horizontal. I'll push through that. Then I'll feel this sensation in my brain, which I would say the closest description I can give to it is as if my brain is thick mud and I'm slogging through that mud. That's the feeling. It's not really a headache, but it's a weird, kind of unpleasant feeling. What I think is really happening there is that left brain it's not wanting to give it up. It's sort of resisting me. And so I have to keep going. I can't lay down. I can't go to sleep. I have to just keep drawing, and eventually it has to give it up. And so once I get into that mode, I find that I lose my sense of time. Again, a similar characteristic to meditation. And I'm sort of awash in this general sense of rightness, like I just want to keep doing this. I don't want to quit. And even when I do quit, I want to get back to it as soon as I can. So, time for this exercise. I hope you all have a clipboard. Take out the thing that looks like half of a vase. And there should be a pencil with your clipboard as well. And what I'd like you to do with that vase, you'll see that the vase looks like a profile of a face, the portion that you have there. And what I'd like you to do is take your pencil and just draw over the profile of the face on the edge that's already printed there. So just go right over the top of it. And as you go over it, you can go over it more than once if you want. As you go over it in your mind, think, oh, that looks like a forehead. This feels like an eye socket. This is the nose. Identify, label. So you're still letting your left side of your brain operate here. And you can do this quickly. There's no reason to take your time and be really cautious and careful with it. Besides, the left brain wants to get done with this. So after you've done that a couple times, go over to the right side, the blank side of the vase, and match it up. And you will find that your brain is probably kind of going, forehead, but I want to match it up. So your eye will be going back and forth between your left and right, trying to match that up, make it symmetrical. And what's happening there is the right side of your brain has to deal with trying to get it to match, right? It's matching, it's not labeling. The left side might be going, yeah, but this is a forehead, and the right hand's going, no, this just matches up with that left side, whatever that is. So this is the first exercise that Betty Edwards has in her book, to see if you can feel physically, I'd say pretty much physically feel that the hemispheres of the brain kind of operating differently. And if you want to try this some more, one, you can make your own vase. You don't need a pre-printed one, right? Easily enough. And the next exercise she has you do that I'm not going to do is to do a face that's real kind of monsterish. So it's not quite as recognizable as a face, exaggerated features and things like that. You can do that on your own if you'd like. The next exercise, take out the blank sheet of paper that's right underneath your vase. And I hope you can all see this, because I want you to quickly reproduce this drawing by Matisse. I'll lower the stand here so you can. So try to do like a 1-minute sketch of this drawing by Matisse. And no judgment, please. Your left brain is going to be judging this. It's going to be going, well, that's not right. This looks weird. Just do it anyway. In Betty Edwards' book, she has a drawing by Picasso. It's a little more complicated, but I wanted this to go a little quicker for the purposes of the presentation today. About 10 more seconds. I see people's heads still bobbing up and down. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay. Now, turn your paper over and draw it again. I'll give you about the same amount of time. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay. So, when you had it like this, did any of your drawings have this shoulder like down below the chin by any chance? I'm just curious. If you did, that's an example of the left brain going, shoulders are always below the head, right? So why would you have a shoulder way up there, okay? There's other things that the left brain will usually do. It'll oftentimes get your proportions way wrong because of the phenomenon of foreshortening. When something is closer to you in the body that you're drawing, it appears, the perspective and the shape of the object looks different when you put it onto a two-dimensional surface like that. So like I mentioned before, when you have it right side up, the left brain is able to recognize faces, fingers, lips, all those sorts of things. So it tends to simplify them. And Unless you have a lot of experience at drawing, then your eyes are already, you've already trained your eyes pretty well, your brain pretty well to actually see the relationships. But if you don't draw much, generally that left brain will dominate and cause these, misproportions. When you turn it upside down, the left brain cannot handle this. It can't figure out what, it kind of knows, oh, there's a hand there, but it has a really rough time. And so what happens is it has to give it up, and then the right brain takes over, and remember we mentioned was spatial? So it sees shapes, instead of a waist and rib cage and hips and arm. It sees this shape right here, for example, and draws that, and then it maybe connects this arm. Did most of you find that your upside down drawing was more accurate?
No.
Really? Well, try this again. It might be that it's up here. That might be part of the problem, that it's too far away. And most people do find that their upside down drawing proportions are way better than their right side up. But maybe, yes, do you have a question?
If you don't mind, I was just wondering, I'm at least more than mildly dyslexic, and I was wondering if that has anything to do with my left, right, up, down.
I have no idea, but that's an interesting thing to speculate about, and maybe do a little research on that. I'm gonna, let's see here. Okay. We're gonna move on to another section, and that's more about viewing art as a meditation. I have an exercise for this, and I don't know if we'll probably won't have time for it, but on one of the sheets that I gave you is, it's called Meditative Art Viewing, and it's just a list of things that I came up with for a process to try to use viewing of art as a meditative thing to focus upon. This is a painting by one of my favorite impressionists, Joaquim Sorolla, Batiste of Spain. He was, I think, a contemporary of Monet and those folks, maybe slightly later. But he was a master of light, as you can see with the light coming through the, I guess that's a mast from a boat. He lived on the east coast of Spain for quite a few years, especially in his heyday, and many of his paintings are seashore paintings with children swimming in the water and women walking along with white parasols and white dresses, and they're just lovely. The poet John Keats wrote that understanding poetry, and I might add paintings, required that we must be willing to put ourselves in a special state of mind, which he called negative capability. He's described this state as one in which a person is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after facts and reason. Doesn't that sound a little right brain to you? It does to me. Without any irritable reaching for facts and reason. Yeah, sounds sort of chatty, doesn't it? That chatty left brain. I am surrounded day in and day out by paintings, my own as well as others. I see them consciously like everyone, analytically most of the time. I see the artist's technique, the strength of their composition and all that, their brush strokes. But another way of seeing paintings has been enlightening to me. For example, I might be talking on the phone, just sort of passively looking at a painting, and suddenly the painting that I've been looking at for weeks, I realize is unbelievably awesome. It just hits me, it's like, whoa, I'm perfect. My colors are absolutely in harmony. The composition, I'm rock solid, and I'm yours. I was painted for you. It's just like, it's just this connection. But it almost only happens when I'm looking at art unconsciously rather than consciously. The Phillips Collection has begun a mindful art program developed by Elizabeth Lakshmi Kanter, a yoga therapist that promotes wellness. The mantra for their program is to think less and feel more. She says the big objective is connecting people more intentionally with the restorative power of art. So when you go to, if you do this method that I've given you the sheet for, choose carefully what you would like to meditate upon. It must be something that gives you initially a good feeling. Does it have colors that you like? Is it a subject or style of work that you're attracted to? Various colors also have an effect, as are mentioned in our mandala program project over here. Red is usually known to stimulate, and it's not recommended, for example, for places like hospitals and things for its association with blood. Green is universally the most soothing color, and I believe probably due to evolutionary dependence upon the green of plant food. So Goethe made this comment that every object well contemplated opens a new organ in us. I kind of ponder what kind of organ is he talking about, but I believe it's probably the brain. So see if you can meditate on a painting and open up that organ.
Jean,
Yes?
could you say the name of the Phillips collection?
The Phillips collection, the artist and program designer, I believe it is Lakshmi Cantor, or Elizabeth Lakshmi Cantor. She's actually a yoga therapist.
Where is that?
It's the Phillips collection. I think it might be in one of the big cities in the East, but I'm not 100% sure. And then quickly, as this was kind of my program, and I was like, well, I did say I was going to talk a little bit more about nature, and of course most of my paintings are nature-oriented. But as I went to bed that night, I'm like, I need to process this and develop this more. And I woke up with this strange dream that I was in the woods, and I came upon this house that was kind of going into ruins. There were no doors anymore, and nature was kind of encroaching upon this house. And then I saw a bear outside, a big black sort of scary bear. And I thought, oh, he can smell me. And sure enough, he smelled me and he came in after me, and I went out the front door and I hid behind the front door, the open door. I was kind of behind it, probably with my feet. I knew my feet were showing, and I knew he could smell me. And all of a sudden he opened the door and he saw me. And then I realized he wasn't a bear, he was a man. He was a really wild man. I mean, he was dirty, and he was a natural man, right? So, wow, what was that all about? I had this just immediate sense that house was my life. Go figure. I don't know if any of you are dream therapists or anything. But so the next day I did some more research, and I came across this, it's actually a relatively new practice called eco-psychology. And I thought that there were a lot of parallels between it and meditation and art and nature. So eco-psychology explores how to develop emotional bonds with nature. It considers this to be worthwhile because when nature is explored and viewed without judgment, it gives the sensations of harmony, balance, timelessness, and stability. Does it sound familiar again? Timelessness, suspension of judgment. To Da Vinci, the eye was truly the window of the soul. And as he emphasized repeatedly, he said, the chief means by where the understanding may most fully and abundantly appreciate the infinite works of nature. So the eyes are the most fully and abundantly the eyes are the chief way that the mind understands the infinite works of nature. Experience in art helps to increase this visual power, the eyes, right? The visual power. As you may have found in these exercises, we don't really see the shape of something like a hand, a rock, a pet, or anything more than when we draw it. I contend that this more acute ability to actually see carries over into a greater awareness of the world in general, making us a better judgment of the environmental needs of the earth. Why are so many of us creatively inspired by the natural world? Editor Donna Seaman, in her introduction to the anthology of fiction In Our Nature, Stories of Wildness, refers to this when she says, the arts, Humanity's flowers are inextricably rooted in the wild. Our symbols, myths, sacred texts, songs, stories, and poems are as inlaid with nature-based metaphors as a meadow is with wildflowers. And I thought it was kind of charming, or whatever, the way she used a metaphor to explain a metaphor. Art is the expression of a powerful and primal force capable of creating real effect in our psyches and within the world. Although not all art, of course, is eco-psychologically intended art, art making is a life practice that focuses and deepens our awareness of our connection with ourselves and the rest of the natural world. I personally find that in any given day that I practice painting or drawing, I feel that it stimulates my right mode, and often for days I'm seeing the world around me with this heightened sense. I see colors are a little bit more vibrant and saturated. I just notice the contrasts. I notice the little details in life, in nature. It thrills me, and at a minimum, it evokes a warm pleasure centered in my heart and lungs. It uplifts my mood. It overcomes anxiety about the problems in the world. I often refer to it as like a pump that's been primed, and that once the practice, that creative practice is going, it's like the pump just keeps going until I quit, and then it dries up but needs to be re-primed. Laura Sewell, in her book Sight and Sensibility, the Eco-Psychology of Perception, says, the creative process emerges from a heightened perception, a sensitivity that is then transformed through the artist's process of thought and imagination and manifested into being through his or her body and its senses. This depth of sensitivity is not just the province of artists either. We are all born with it. Cultivating our perceptual capacity is fundamentally related to both the quality of our personal lives and restoring the quality of life on the planet. And Dr. Teresa Sweeney, who has a great website, and it's SWEENEY. If you just do a search for eco-psychology, you'll find her, and she has some great articles there. She says, researchers have discovered that verbal memories are stored in the left side of the brain, that eco-psychology refers to as the new brain, and imagistic associations of all the emotions we've experienced are stored in the right side of the brain, or our primitive and old brain. According to eco-psychologists, the psychological split between the old brain and the new brain has its origin in modern man's unacknowledged mental disconnection from nature, his broken bond with the earth. Eco-psychology is based upon the belief that a culturally induced, unconscious mental separation of people from the health-sustaining, nonverbal wisdom of the natural world within and around them underlies the environmental problems and many of the emotional disorders from which we suffer. In the aftermath of the industrial, technical, and communication revolutions, we've lost touch with much of nature's ancient wordless wisdom inherent within ourselves. But we don't know we miss it because our innovations convince us that we can live without it. Despite the conviction of many wedded to the story that humans were created to subdue and dominate nature, man is only one thread in the connected web of life. As we destroy other threads, we destroy ourselves. If we can recover a sense of oneness with our world, eco-psychologists explain we can become better environmental stewards of our home and of ourselves.
Just to interrupt again, what was
Yep.
the first name of the Swedish?
Teresa.
Thank you.
She's a PhD and a Doctor of Education in Applied Eco-Psychology. Eco-psychology and art therapies facilitate our ability to connect with nature or to sense our own oneness with the earth and all living things. In ancient times, as far back as the prehistoric cave paintings, before science, art, and religion were thought of as separate realms, Our fundamental thoughts and feelings were expressed through the language of images. We used art to celebrate and understand the natural world around us. Nearly all ancient cultures, many indigenous peoples, have been living these concepts throughout history. And on your clipboard, there's a little, or a big postcard, I should say, that's from a painting that I did called Our Sisters. And on it, it's a paraphrase of a speech by Chief Seattle that says, "We are part of the earth and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The deer, the horses, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crest, the juices of the meadows, the body heat of the pony and man, all belong to the same family." And the Bible is full of references that show people using both the arts and nature for healing purposes long before either were formally describable. The book of Samuel shows an early example of using the arts for therapy by discussing David's attempt to cure King Saul's depression by playing the harp for him. Similarly, the Bible contains many stories about Jesus retreating to nature, presumably to gather strength and insight. A quote from the book of Job 12, verse 8 states, "Speak to the earth and it will teach thee." Other examples of art that are ecocentric as well as inducing enlightenment include the Buddhist sand mandala. Here's an example of the monks doing one here, similar to what we're doing over here. And ours is inspired by this process, correct? The Ipolera Aboriginal community in the Northern Territory of Australia. This is quite a large one. You can kind of see in the background, those are trees. So this probably covers about an acre or so. And I believe they just mostly use natural earth. So colored yellow ochre earth and probably white lime and that sort of thing. And of course they have now progressed to doing works like that with all the little dots in acrylic. That's their more modern method. And then the Navajo sand paintings. Similar, very similar, a lot of parallels here. So nature is my solace. It's a place to quiet the mind, and thus I draw to subjects of nature in my art. The process itself is meditative due to my chosen subject matter, such as a painting that glorifies the natural chaos of leaves of grass in complementary shades of color, or a flock of swan over a corn stubble field. A subtle sense of goodwill and gentle pleasure permeates me. The paint is a natural chemistry of pigments and water that mix, flow, and blend, forming infinite and instantaneous combinations that will never occur again in the same way, place, or time. I have to let that go. I have to let it flow. It takes me back to my childhood of standing in front of an easel with tempera paint with a big floppy brush and no preconceived ideas about what to create. But the process was pure pleasure. There was no self-critic, just a 5-year-old human being with the urge to represent something with pictures, color, and hue and line. Picasso said that every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain one after growing up. In the same vein, eco-psychologists argue that every child is born with unimpeded senses and is thus bonded to the earth. The problem is how to remain nature-connected in our culture, which thwarts and breaks inherent sensory bonds before the child has any ideas that he ever had them. Through art today, we can open our senses and intellect to experiencing and connecting with the human and non-human world for the physical, psychological, and spiritual health of all. In the shared language of art and nature, we, people of diverse ages, cultures, and faiths, meet in practices that are anchored in our ancestral traditions, that respects our differences and highlights our oneness. This connection of all creation, felt by us through art and nature, will help us bring old wisdom to a new cultural story, improving ourselves and the world in which we live. Thank you. Is time for questions or not?
We're running a little short, but we have time for a few questions if anyone would like to ask Jean about her art or work. No questions? All right.
So, Jean, when you do something like that, so lots of light, do you go outside and paint it? Do you
Lynn's question is if I paint on location or in the studio, essentially. I do both. I do prefer to be on location, definitely. But sometimes when I work in the studio, I'll work from photographs that I took, and they're very different from the on-location pieces. But, yeah.
Something like that is so in the moment, it doesn't last very long.
I did that one from a photo, basically, yeah. But then the grass one at the beginning, that one, yeah, I'd have to back all the way up in that. You know, I do a lot of grass pieces, and partly that's because there's not a lot of defined form, and so it's almost like an abstract, and I can just kind of intuit my way through it. I usually start with an inspiration, like a color, like in the first one, there's this turquoise magenta wheat tone, and that was sort of the colors theme or scheme of the piece, with a certain type of grass as the main subject matter. But then sort of an abstract composition using those. So, yeah. Yes?
When you do work from photos, are you working from your own photos? And can you say a little bit about how important it is for you to actually be out in the place, even if you're bringing that material back to the studio to work?
Well, okay, the question, hopefully I get that. It's how important is it that I'm working from my own photos and going out and actually experiencing what I'm photographing before, as I'm bringing it back to work in the studio. Well, first of all, there's the whole plagiarism issue, so you don't want to do too much copying somebody else's work, and that's something I was taught way back in high school. But, I still gather like reference material. So with the swans, I had some photographs of swans. But I think they talk about the sense of place as well when you're doing representational art, and especially landscapes, of course. And that one's kind of basically a landscape with the swans. And so even though I didn't actually take that photograph, I had gone out on a gray, rainy day down along the Mississippi River to see the swans as they migrated, which is usually, I think, in about November. It's kind of late, cold, gray kind of time of year. And that was the sense of place that I was trying to represent. Another thing that I've done actually in the studio with my own photographs is I project them with a projector like this upside down, and I work them upside down. So I feel like they end up being much stronger compositionally. I think it's because my sense of the values is really accurate. So not only, I think, does your left brain sort of dominate in terms of the shapes, I think it probably keeps your eye from seeing the subtle variations in tone from darkness to lightness. So I think that was more accurate as well.
Thank you, Jean. It's been a wonderful talk.